69 Exhibition Road, 12 true life tales from the fag end of punk, porn and performance. When I introduced this at the top of the show, I said, what could possibly go wrong on a Friday afternoon? It's a vibrant, wry and engaging account of life as an adventurous queer young person in late 1970s London. I'm not going to give it any more of an introduction because we've got her live on the line from a luxurious place somewhere in Berlin, Dorothy Max Prior, and we're going to call you Max from here on in. Max, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon and greetings. Welcome from Berlin. I'm here for the Berlin Independent Film Festival, so that's what I'm doing here.
And what are you doing? Are you judging? Are you performing? Are you ligging? Are you just checking out the canapes and the strength of the margaritas?
No. Oh, no, canapes. That sounds good. I'm actually here with a film called The Bystanders, which I'm an associate producer of. So that's another hat I'm wearing. I've got about 20 hats that I juggle in life.
I was going to say, because, I do try and do some research on these things. I don't try and lig it all the time. And when I went to your website, which is very lovely, by the way, there's a whole list of bits and pieces at the front. I mean, teaching, creating, writing, the music. I mean, blimey, O'Reilly. Max, you don't keep still, do you?
Yeah, I think part of the thing is when you get to be like 67 years old, your CV just gets to a sort of ridiculous length. That's partly it. When you're 20, you've only done about 3 things, but kind of give it another 4 or 5 decades, and it gets a bit ridiculous.
Now,
I normally just. Oh, go on. I was just going to say that I normally just say artist and writer these days, because then that covers a multitude of sins, really.
Sins being the operative word in this case. Now then, let's go back in time, Max. Let's go back in time to this is my 70s DJ voice. Back in time, the 70s. It was all pop-tastic, the whole bits and pieces. And you are in South Ken, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's where 69 Exhibition Road, the eponymous address that gave its title to the book. I have to explain to younger people that know London. I mean, nowadays you couldn't live in the places I lived in South Kensington and Notting Hill. You couldn't live there nowadays unless you were actually a millionaire. But at the time, it was these areas were all full of squats, or in our case, very cheaply rented, very rundown houses. I think I say somewhere in the book that it had a kind of fantasy that this might have been the house that Polanski filmed Repulsion in. But, if you've seen that film, that kind of peeling paint, old columns, really decrepit stairways, and then loads of rooms with a Yale lock on each door.
Yep. Remember it well. And younger people will shudder, but with a shared bathroom somewhere, they these huge sort of Georgian townhouses, and we were all living in, we thought they were great. We thought they were studio apartments, but they were basically squats, and it was now health and safety would have a field day with it. And a payphone in the hall if you were lucky.
A payphone down in the basement, yes, right down in the bottom where the mice were scuttling around in the coal cellar. So the payphone kind of played a part in the story.
But the thing is, I mean, it was you were young, you could live in London, and so therefore, because as we know, in London the streets are paved with gold, and a young person can earn their fortune. So everybody sort of flocked there from various bits and pieces, trying to, as you say, the fag end of punk, because punk had exploded up and down the King's Road with Vivian and Malcolm and Sex the Shop and the whole thing, and we'd gone through that period. And you're there or thereabouts, what, in 77, 78? When do you sort of stop bumping into people, as it were?
I'm there from 75, 76. I actually started living in the house from late 1976. But the thing that we ended up calling punk was kind of happening in its sort of early stages in 1975 and early 1976. So you mentioned Malcolm and Vivian. They had a shop called Sex, but before it was called Sex, it's called various other things. And they started off selling kind of 50s style things, and then sort of switched to all the kind of latex and leather and strange T-shirts with slogans on, situationist slogans and all the rest of it.
and the thing is, of course, it wasn't so much as a shop as a kind of meeting place. And these days, because the retail experiences get them in, get them to spend their money and get them out again. But, people could hang out. People could, with very little money, because nobody had any money, basically, could just sort of hang out all day and talk about what they'd been reading or listening to, or what album they'd imported, or hey kids, let's put a band together now.
Yes. Well, I think whether you could the first time I went in there, like a lot of people, I just ran straight out again. because it was really scary. I mean, there was this sales assistant called Jordan, who later became a very dear friend. And Jordan was famous for her, her beehive hairstyle and her, sort of eyeliner under her eyes, and wearing things like see-through skirts with nothing on underneath, and latex one-piece suits that she wore on the train travelling up from the south coast, on the Brighton to London train. And she occasionally got moved into the first class compartment because she was causing so much of a furore, on the commuter line.
I had the great fortune of interviewing her a couple of years ago, and the nicest person I have ever interviewed. She was so gracious with her time, and you would think, oh, Jordan, she's going to be like, well, F you then, because I used to wear see-through dresses. But honestly, I mean, well, you obviously knew better than I did, Max. But what a lovely woman she was.
Really lovely person. Sadly died last year, but absolutely gorgeous person. But she had this sort of look on her face, So and Vivian was also pretty frightening. So when you first went in, I think they sussed you out by giving you what we might call an old-fashioned look. And then when they realised you were all right and you were sort of genuinely interested in the whole thing, the clothes and the counterculture and whatever, and you weren't just a voyeur, then they put on all the charm and were very nice after all.
and were you in London being a musician or an artist or just hanging out? Because you were you had a few years perhaps on some of the teenagers who were hanging around, the 16-year-olds who'd run away from Woking or something like that. So were you in London they're sort of doing performance arts or modelling or whatever you were doing? Because you weren't being a musician there at the time, to begin with, were you?
I wasn't. No, I'm London born and bred, so I'm a South London girl, kind of working class background. So I went to teacher training college because that's what bright working class girls did, go off and train to be a teacher. But I dropped out of that halfway through, worked in various alternative bookshops, and then did a bit of glamour modelling, and then worked as a go-go dancer. On the sort of what they euphemistically call the exotic dancing circuit.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yes.
Was this before Soho was all sort of sanitised and that sort of bits and pieces?
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, I worked in places like the Chelsea drugstore, which some people might know from the film Clockwork Orange. It's the music boutique in Clockwork Orange. That really was old school go-go dancing. Sort of tossing your hair from side to side under the strobe lights, wearing a turquoise sequined bikini and a pair of white kinky boots, that kind of thing. And then it got a bit sort of sleazier, and the sort of striptease in the pub started and so on and so forth. So yeah, I was doing that. And no, I wasn't a musician at all. I mean, I'd always been a dancer. I danced all my life, various different sorts of dancing, sort of tap and jazz and all sorts. And then I just got invited to be a drummer.
Right.
Basically.
As you do. You're a dancer, you've got rhythm, you can be drums.
Well, I just met these couple of young men. They were only about 18 at the time. They were called Andy and Bid. And they had a band that somebody was singing in, a guy called Stuart.
Stuart, eh?
And Stuart, yes. And so they just said, oh, would you like to come and be in our band? And I said, well, and would you like to play drums? And I said, well, I don't play drums and I don't have a drum kit. But they didn't seem to think any of that was too important, because this was the sort of punk ethos, really. You don't really need to know how to actually do anything to do it.
Yeah.
So they were great Velvet Underground fans, which is why I think, the Velvet Underground had a female drummer called Mo Tucker. So I think because they also decided that my name was Max. They just changed my name, which they never explained why. So I just think that they had it in their heads that as they were a kind of British, version of the Velvet Underground, then they too ought to have a female drummer with a one-syllable name beginning with M.
Interesting. And talking about Underground, is it true that you basically locked yourself in a cellar to practice? Is that the urban myth, or is that actually true?
I don't know if we actually locked ourselves in, but we did do a lot of. I mean, there was a lot of practicing in. This particular band is the one that ended up becoming Adam and the Ants and the Monochrome set. It sort of split into two two camps, if you like.
Yeah.
The young art student called Stuart changed his name to Adam Ant, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, I formed a band called Rima Rima, we were actually the first signings to the 4AD record label. And then we used to do all-nighters in the Halligan's rehearsal studio on the Holloway Road. So that was a kind of lock-in.
Yeah.
It was basically just gave us the keys, and he went off to the pub, and we just stayed there and made music.
And it was very much, I mean, you mentioned the underground. I mean, I have caught a couple of the Rima Rima stuff, and it's got that very sort of kale, it's a listen, isn't it? I mean, it wasn't piped up, it certainly wasn't racy, and it certainly wasn't sort of squeeze, and, 10-year-olds could bop along to it, could they?
No, it was, adventurous experiments in sound, I'd say. And it had Marco Peroni on guitar, so it had a very, very rich and raucous kind of guitar sound, but it also had experimental sort of synths and what we'd now call sampling, but, using interesting electronic and concrete sound. Yeah, and it does actually still sound it still doesn't sound, it's still kind of what you might call uneasy music, it's still quite disturbing, even though it's 40-something years ago. Yeah,
well, it's certainly not the UK subs reforming again, is it? Let's put it that way. And of course, Marco was obviously at one point because everybody goes, oh, Adam and the Ants, Adam and, but Marco was kind of the music. I mean, Stuart was the beautiful face, etc. But Marco was he was the musician, wasn't he? I mean, he was pretty much the guy
in the kind of famous version of the Ants. I mean, I was sort of entangled with the Ants right from the very beginning, because this band, that the person that invited me to play drums was Andy Warren, who was the original bass player in the Ants, and he formed the Ants with Adam. And then he left, and we had the whole furore with Malcolm McLaren sort of stealing the band and calling them Bow Wow Wow, and bringing in a 14-year-old girl singer.
Yes,
that's a whole other story. Yeah,
oh, yes, indeed.
And then Adam poaching, Marco from Rima Rima, although to be absolutely fair, Marco had already decided that he was going to leave. So, so he joined forces with Adam, and really it was the combination that, I mean, it was what Adam always wanted. He just wanted a songwriting partner who wasn't so interested in, the limelight kind of thing, who was basically, I mean, Marco's a real studio musician. He really, really loves, making records, basically. So they were the perfect match. It was
I mean, if you remember the videos, I mean, there's Stuart doing his thing, and 1,000 teenage girls screaming at him, and there's always this. It must have been Stand or Deliver or Prince jumping, and Marco just looks to camera in one of them. He's playing a lute or something, and you just think, because he's just going, okay, I'm here, I'm doing a lute. Look at Adam, but the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you've put the book down as the fag end of that particular period. So have you sort of like taken snapshots? How have you structured the narrative, Max?
Well, it's structured as 12 short stories, so 12 autobiographical short stories. It's kind of a continuous narrative, but the original intention was that they were standalone stories. I mean, I think at the kind of editing and publishing stage, it got edited a little bit more so that it was a kind of continuous narrative. But there's a story about the whole go-go dancing and stripping scene in London. There's a story that's just about Adam and the Ants. There's a story that's just about Rima Rima. There's a story about the Institute of Contemporary Arts and where I worked and was involved with putting on the infamous prostitution exhibition. So there's these, a set of, if you like, 12 vignettes or snapshots of life in London at the time.
And curating those sort of exhibitions, which cause massive, oh my goodness, the youth of today headlines. But you've been an artist, you've done performance style art, you've done installation style art. Wasn't there something about bedrooms at one stage as well? If I remember correctly, did you do a bedroom?
Oh yes, that came many years later. Right, but okay. Yes, Yeah, there was a show that was 2015, I think it was, called In My Room, which was part of the Spill Festival in London. But, all the kind of seeds were sown in the 70s for all that kind of work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think often we didn't use the same kind of terminology. And I mean, now I would say that something that I also played in Psychic TV with Genesis Fiorage, we created a thing called the Fabulous Feast of Flowering Light at Hammersmith Palais, and that had Kathy Acker reading her, reading her prose, and it had, Mantis Dance Company and lots of bands playing, and it had Derek Jarman's films and John Maybury's films. I mean, nowadays we'd call this a multidiscipline cross-art form performance event, but then it was like, oh, it's kind of geeky with lots of funny bits.
Yeah, but the thing is, people think about punk and they will always say, oh, well, it's Malcolm and it's the Pistols and that's pretty much, and people spitting. But there was an arts base to it. There was the Dada, there was the whole experience from that. And yeah, you mentioned Jarman, filmmaker, we've got Jubilee, all that sort of stuff. And people putting on, saying, okay, we may have come from the Royal, the Institute, but we're going to put on happenings, which the Flower Children would have called them, and that's giving good grounding, because now you look at it and people like Mick Jones are, I played on the TV, then there's Glenn Matlock on Sky News, and you think these people are now becoming the older statesmen of this, that, and the other, and Paul Cookie is and Jenny spend some time down here in southern Spain as well, and she looks amazing, but these are now the elder statesmen, if you like, of that generation. It's difficult not to look back with that sort of, the rose tinted, because it was a period of as you said, London was pretty much falling down. There was tremendous violence against women. There was horrendous racism, and there was, basically the punk movement was getting commercialized as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It was actually pretty grimy and pretty horrible on a day-to-day level. I mean, London was still a bomb site there were still all these bomb sites from the Second World War. That's hard to believe. The war ended in 1945. Yeah, in 1975, Covent Garden was still just a whole load of bomb sites with corrugated iron around it. I mean, now, it's just full of all these shishi little shops and things like that. But an awful lot of London looked like that. Derek Jarman's Jubilee really, really does, to me, looks like a documentary about London rather than a fantasy film. All of that kind of people lighting fires on old bomb sites and, just wrecked prams in the end of the road. And, mind you, London's starting to look like that again, without getting too political about things. It is quite... it's quite astonishing how when I was writing the book, say 5 years ago, I felt I was writing about a London that really, really didn't exist anymore. And just post-Brexit, just in the last few years, I mean, we seem to be going back there. Anyway, probably.
But the thing is, and I just on that point, I was talking to somebody today, and I said you've got to watch The Long Good Friday, because in that movie, in 1980, they're talking about Docklands, and it's just this flattened bits where Canary Wharf will sun one day, and it's just a brilliant historical. And there are these streets that some streets were untouched by the war, so they're standing, and then at the end of the road is a bloody great bomb site. But anyway, the thing about the punk movement, though, and also it was. And we talk about now and then, but then you had to go to an event. You had to hand out flyers and go, right, I'm doing an exhibition at down the road in a town hall in this space we found, come down, and people would move and come and physically interact with you. And now perhaps the problem is, though the social media has done many great things and allowed a lot of artists to get out there, people are reticent to sort of to do the live experience because they'd rather sit in their bedrooms and do the 3 chords or do the art exhibition or whatever.
Maybe, although I do feel that post-pandemic there is a kind of quite a hunger for getting out there and for actual, things that you engage with physically and things that you actually go to. So yeah, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I think there is a future for live things, because I think people are. I mean, I'm really interested, for example, as someone who's wearing a different hat, edited various print magazines and things. Is the whole zine thing? The number of people that are starting up print magazines now, which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
We thought, and it's great, and also making vinyl, vinyl records. It's funny that there's a number of things, actual physical artifacts that maybe 5 or 6 years ago we or 10 years ago, definitely we would have been saying, oh no, the era for that is gone. That's over. And now, people are really into vinyl. People are into actual print magazines. So I think the actual physical artifacts, I think that's really interesting.
All those people.
And they'll survive in the way things, I mean, we create archives on websites to kind of preserve things, but it's the websites that will go down.
Yeah.
The actual physical copies of magazines and vinyl records, they'll be around in like 100 years' time, for people to discover.
All those people who threw away their vinyl collection to put it all on a computer, it's like, ah.
Yeah. No, I'm a real enthusiast for actual artifacts, like books.
Aha, indeed. And talking of which, so why the book? Was it just I want to take a snapshot because this is the period of time that made me who I am today? Was that to do the cheesy American voiceover? It was a time.
I've published quite a lot of things, more as pieces of journalism or essays or short stories in various kind of magazines or in other people's books. And then in 2020, this funny thing happened around about March, which is that all of my performance work got cancelled.
Really?
Why was that?
I know. Must have been dodgy prawn or something. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Something happened. Yeah. So I suddenly found myself with no live, performance work or anything happening. And I just thought, oh, okay, well, now's the moment to actually dig out all those pieces of writing, some of which were published and some of which were just languishing away in bottom drawers in various parts of the house. And it was great, blue skies, birds singing, house empty, had a whale of a time. So I just pulled everything together between, sort of March and October 2020. And then Strange Attractor Press were interested, which was lovely because they're a really, really lovely publishing press. They're all the things that are, again, we're talking about vinyl and about people starting their own zines and magazines. People like Strange Attractor and, certain other small companies, they're just publishing things they're really interested in. And it's just like a couple of people that are doing it, rather than a massive, great sort of factory of employees who don't really care about anything. So I think that's another thing that's really, really positive, that you have these kind of just, two-man organizations that just get on with it and do lovely things.
Yeah, exactly. And do what you want to do. And just say it again about what you're doing in Berlin. So you're now in film production or documentary production. What are you doing over there, Max?
It's actually, I've been involved with the making of a British independent sci-fi comedy, and it's called The Bystanders.
Okay.
And it's being shown in the Berlin Independent Film Festival, which is on at the moment. So we've got the screening tonight, actually, at 10 p.m. Anybody who's listening in Berlin, come along.
Get yourselves down there. Are you on the show? Do you do the? I mean, you've got the website, of course, so of course they can follow what you're up to. Where can people track you down and find out what you're doing and order some copies of this marvelous book and this fascinating snapshot? Where can they find you online?
They can find me at Dorothy Max on the usual things. Like I don't use Twitter that much; it gets on my nerves a little bit. But I'm on Instagram at Dorothy Max. I've got the website dorothymaxprior.com. Strange Attractor Press are out there, and the book actually has just come out in paperback, and it's just gone into regular distribution. So it's you can get it on Amazon basically, or via Bookshop.org or any of those things.
Good reason, and also it will be available as a virtual download from our own virtual bookstore. If there's a memory that you would pick up and go, that was a good one, would it be is it live performance, is it your improving your drumming skills, is it what would you say was a snapshot of that time?
I suppose I think October 1976 at the Institute of Contemporary Arts, it's quite extraordinary to think of how many things happened within the space of a week. We had the opening of the prostitution exhibition. We had we used the theatre to put on really, really brilliant experimental things like Hot Peaches from New York. and Lumiere and Son from London. And then after the show's finished in the theatre, we put gigs on. So we put The Clash on, we put Subway Sect and Suburban Studs. Patti Smith came down and danced, you know. So you just had all of this happening. And then meanwhile in the cinema, we were running like an ethnographic film festival. So we had the early films of Mike Leigh. You know, and it's all happening within the same week or 2 weeks, you know, all over the building.
Sounds absolutely.
So I'll pick that as the moment.
If
October 76, Institute of Contemporary Arts.
If I get that time machine up and running by the weekend, I think that you and I should take a trip back there, because that sounds absolutely brilliant. But in the meantime, if you can't get the time machine up and working by the weekend, go forth and find the book, 69 Exhibition Road, 12 True Life Tales from the Fag End of Punk, Porn and Performance. And congratulations on the subhead, because it's absolutely brilliant. It's by Dorothy Max Prior. Dorothy, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Giles. It's been lovely to speak to you.